Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by on another dull, miserable, windy, rainy day with no good light. Marvellous. Still, that's the UK winter for you. And today's news is that there isn't any news. Today there is not a lot going on. My Mordier is still out. That's lasting really well. Despite the dry air in the house. I mean, I do my best with the humidity trays, and they do make a localised difference, and it's quite useful the fact that the air is pretty still in the house, otherwise the humidity trays just wouldn't work. They don't give off that much humidity, but when the air's not moving much, they do. You know, it's a very local environment. I mean, that's actually saying I've got 66% around these plants. Well, I'm happy with that in a home environment. This little Phalaenopsis is lasting well. That's the Zeng Min Brontosaurus. And I really do like that one. Blooms last ages, but then that's Phalaenopsis, they do that. The other little one has opened another bloom. It's got another one to go. Again, pretty little flowers. The Psychopsis is, if it hasn't already, yeah, it's about to drop. But there's the next bud underneath, ready to go. That's what they do. This Sweet Memory, all the blooms were at the end of the spike, and that's the thing I'm not too happy about with Phalaenopsis. Big strappy plant, and then miles away from the plant are a couple of blooms on the end of a spike. Now, yes, they're pretty blooms, but you know, the Phalaenopsis that have the blooms the full length of the spike are the ones I like best, but that tends to be the, you know, the complex hybrids. They're bred to do that. But the spike has branched nicely in two places. Now, I don't think there will be many blooms on those two spikes, possibly only one. But at least it's branching, so it's doing something, you know, growing, doing something. That are good. Out here, as I said, there's not a lot going on as far as changes are concerned. I mean, things are moving. I mean, the yellow twinkle's out in its glory now, with the cherry baby poking up through the middle. I mean, I try and get the plants that are actually in bloom to the front of a shelf somewhere so that they're prominent, so that I get to see them. I mean, that big blue Vanda's still hanging in there. I am very surprised that those blooms are still there. That spike has lasted a lot longer than the previous spike. So I'm pretty confident now it's temperature related. Yeah, the blooms last quite a lot longer in cooler temperatures. I don't know whether that's across the board for all orchids, but it's certainly true on that one. Previous spike was back in the summer, and this one's lasted a good 3 weeks longer than that already, and it's not going over yet. So the Nellie Isla's got a split on the lip there. I probably damaged that moving it around myself, but it's opened up a couple more blooms, still 3 to go. That's a nice spike. What else have we got? Oh, if you go and look at Ed's Orchids, at his video that's not in his greenhouse, it's in his lady friend's house, there's a short clip of Dendrobium hancockii in bloom. So, you know, there's a video of what the blooms look like, and boy, am I looking forward to them, if I ever get any. But and also he's got one rather splendid Dendrobium delicatum in that video as well. And if none of you, if you haven't experienced the fragrance of that, it puts Sherry baby to shame, quite honestly. It's a very sickly fragrance, but it's so heavy. We had one of those at the show last year in February, good sort of specimen plant, and it filled the hall. The whole hall where the orchid show was. Everywhere you were, you could smell that delicatum. So if you like the highly fragrant stuff, have a go at one of them. But to get them to bloom well, they do need to chill down in the winter, otherwise they won't. They'll have a trickle of blooms instead of a flood, as they say. What else? The Cymbidiums, I think that's it. I think that's how the blooms are going to stay. They're not going to open any more than that, and that's not untypical of Cymbidium blooms. So I'm not sort of disappointed that they haven't opened properly, because a lot do look like that with that sort of cup shape. But it's a nice colour, and my daughter's coming down this weekend as far as I know, and she's going to be over the moon with that, because it's really her plant. She got it at the funeral of one of her friends who grew orchids, you know, on windowsills and things in his flat near where she lived. And after he died, she sort of inherited this Cymbidium, but couldn't look after it herself, so I took it on. So she's going to be pleased that that's bloomed nicely, because neither of us knew what the hell it was going to look like. The Laelia anceps is still out in all its glory. These are not long-lived blooms. Now, hopefully they'll last a bit longer than they might have done at a different time of year, but nonetheless they're not going to be around too much longer, I don't think. The nobly behind it, the Prima Donna, all of last year's canes, which are the big strappy ones still in full leaf, have got buds virtually the entire length of the canes. I've also got buds on older canes coming on as well. There's on, you know, I mean, these canes are virtually leafless. They've just got one, or in that case none, left. But there's buds all over that thing, absolutely all over it. That's hopefully going to be a good show. The only downside is just looking at the size of the buds. There's going to be a flush of blooms ahead of the main flush. It would be nice if they were all together, but you can see on the last year's growths, the buds are still in their, what I call the embryo format. They just look like a bud. Well, obviously as they push on, you see the buds starting to form. 1, 2, 3, occasionally 4 buds start sticking out of the end of the growth as it progresses. You can see here as well. Whereas the others are still pushing on nubbins, I would call them. That's the stage they're at. They're not little tiny nubbins anymore. They are pushing on. Sorry about the racket, but it's blowing a gale out there today. I think it's even got a name. I think this is Gale or Storm Georgina. I don't see how that makes it nicer for us, giving it a flipping name. It's still going to blow all the fences down and branches off the trees. No matter what you call it. I got lots of names for them, but not on a video. The Aphyllum Kiki, giant version Kiki, the buds are now actually starting to show. So visible buds on that now. It's not going to be a massive blooming or anything. It might only be half a dozen flowers, but the fact that it's bloomed on a Kiki, albeit a big Kiki, I'm over the moon. I mean, that one came from Alberto in Italy. You know, with all the transport and everything, a Kiki detached from the mother plant and mounted and mucks about, and this is its first winter here in the UK. The fact that I got some blooms, I'm over the moon. This Findlayanum, sorry, I'm trying not to knock everything over. You can see just about, there are buds in places, so I think I may get blooms. But then it did that last year, and 2 of them turned into Kikis. Talking of Kikis, the Kiki factory up in the corner here, the Dendrobium Victoria Reginae, you can see what it's doing. Those are not buds, those are Kikis. You toad. I was hoping for buds this time round. Oh well, maybe later. But, you know, at least I'll get some new plants off of it. And I mean, you know, it grew quite well last year, so I mean, it's developed some nice canes. And strictly speaking, these canes that are producing Kikis are new canes. They're last year's growths. They've still got all their leaves on. And this type of dendrobium normally blooms on the older canes that have become leafless, the deciduous canes. So maybe I'm jumping the gun expecting that to bloom. Maybe. As far as the Cattleyas are concerned, things are going on. If you look down there at that brown looking sheath, that's full of buds. So that one's going to bloom, and that's one of my new acquisitions, that one. I only got that later last year. So that'd be nice. Now I'm going to have trouble now. I've done something to my shoulder, the side of my neck. I think I slept on it funny, but I'm having trouble lifting my arm up high today. without it giving me a bit of jip, but I can put up with that. Those buds are pushing on nicely, that bunch of buds. That's a bright orange Cattleya with sort of medium-sized flowers. I think there's 6, maybe 7 buds on that spike. And, ow, if I can get up there, that set of buds there is actually on the same plant. It's just the other side of the plant, so that's going to be quite a good show. While I'm up there in pain, that spike on the epidendrum has opened up nicely now. That is a lovely rich orange colour, and several more spikes to come over there, showing their colour now, so they won't be too far behind. Ow! Get my arm back down where it goes. This Dendrobium phalaenopsis did at least manage to open one of its set of buds on that spike. It aborted all the rest, they blasted, but at least I got one, so I now know that that's the white one, and yes, it's got a label. And I'll see if I can hold the camera around and get a reasonable shot of that bloom. That's my other Dendrobium phalaenopsis. That's a named one, that's Thai Angel, and it has a delicate patterning on it that is a little unusual for that type of phalaenopsis. It's like a veining throughout the lip and the petals, and it's a lovely colour, absolutely gorgeous. There's another few buds to come on that spike, 2 open, and looks like another 3 to go. Oof. So I don't suffer pain lightly. It's more of an annoyance than anything, but this camera today feels really heavy. That sounds daft, but this little pinguicular bloom is going over, but it will be quickly replaced by another one. This one's got a couple of buds on. I don't think that one's bloomed yet. That was one of the new ones. These are single rosette types, and they do have the big strappy leaves on them, so they are actually rosettes, if you see what I mean, whereas this type, that's the same sort of plant as this, just in a different pot. These came from Oliver's greenhouse as a present. But yeah, they're growing okay. I mean, these little, well, they weren't much more than seedling plants when I got them. That one has pushed on at a hell of a rate through the winter. Massive roots in under there. These two are okay. They've lost quite a few leaves through the winter, but they are now growing again. So it is starting to push on. There's going to be quite a few sort of plants in here, probably 3 or 4 as the season progresses. And that's the other seedling from Oliver. Again, that's growing on quite nicely. And it's doing its job well with those dratted fungus gnats. That's what they're in here for, not just the pretty blooms. They're here to work. You work. Those flies get on my nerves in my face all the time. There's another clip I filmed a couple of days ago that I'll add in. There's a Maxillaria that's got spikes on that hasn't bloomed for me before. It's a first time bloomer, but I can't film it now. It's up the back of a shelf, but I have a clip that I can add in. Now this is my little Maxillaria picta, and this has been sitting there quietly growing, pushed on 2-3 new bulbs, and I thought it was growing some new growths. But if we look at how this grows, yeah, I got a feeling those are spikes. Well, 2 of them are. That one might not be. That could be another new growth. But those look like spikes to me. So that'll be, could be, I won't say will be, could be a first time bloomer. I haven't seen this one. It was bought as a very young plant. I wasn't expecting it to bloom. But those do look like spikes to me. I'm just desperately trying to rack my brains thinking about what the new growths progressed like. You know, I mean, everything starts like this, doesn't it? You know, a little spiky thing coming out the side of a pseudo bulb. But then they change shape quite dramatically if they're going to be spikes. And those look like spikes. We will have to wait and see, and I don't know how fast they'll progress, because in theory it's the first time it's bloomed. Or produced some more new growths. We'll have to wait and see. That'll be interesting. This nobly Spring Dreamer pollen hasn't finished all its buds yet. There's still some buds up round the back, but it is coming towards the end of this particular little flush, although there's some buds coming on some of the older canes now, and there are still some buds lower down on this cane. The buds on this cane opened from the bottom up towards the top, and now it's decided to go back to the bottom and start again. Now unfortunately with Noblies they can only do that once. Each node can only bloom once. They don't ever bloom again. So once all the nodes are used up, that cane won't bloom again. But it can still support, you know, a cane that size on a plant like this. It's probably a third of the strength of the whole plant is in that one cane. Nice big fat cane grown last year and doing its thing with the blooms, albeit a bit earlier in the year than normal, shall we say. What else? This polybulbin's got, I think most of the buds are open now, the ones that are going to open. Yeah, I think so. Oh, no, there's a couple more still, just starting on some of the other growths, but I've got 5 flowers on there. There was another bud to go there. I can see another 2 or 3 buds. Very pretty little blooms. I'm very pleased with that. What a spectacle that would be if it ever did a mass blooming, you know, with a dozen or more blooms on. Lovely little blooms. My only Cattleya is still at it. This spike has been on this plant since I got it, and it's branched. Not only branched, one of the branches has now branched. So these two are relatively recently opened. I think that will probably be it on that spike. This spike up here, these blooms are aging now. They're starting to lose their colour. But again, that's got a branch with another 2 or 3 buds. So that's been in bloom one hell of a long time. That, I think, is about it. My mounted Phalaenopsis are getting a dunk in a bucket, as they do nowadays. Because of the dry air in the house, basically, the house is not the best place for mounted orchids, especially when they've got exposed roots like that. So to make sure they're fully hydrated now, every other day they go in there. I can't get all 4 of them in at once, which is a pain, so it delays my Vanda watering. But they get first go at the warm water. You know, the hot water goes in the bottles go in there, warm up the water, they get first go at it. The Vandas come second. Quite honestly, last winter the Vandas got stuck in the bucket without warming the water up and they didn't die. But it is better for orchids if they get, you know, ambient temperature water, temperatures similar to the air that they're growing in, or even a bit warmer. It doesn't hurt them. Little Maxillara Sophronitis is still blooming up the back there, although most of those blooms are fading now. I can still see a couple more buds to come, but yeah, that's still out in bloom. That's doing well. And I'm going to stick the tripod up now, and I've deliberately left this till last. I'm going to have a play with the CalMag. So if you're not interested in TDS and mucking about with stuff like that, you can bail out at this point. That's why I deliberately left it till the end, because I know it's not everybody's cup of tea talking about that sort of stuff. And if you're interested, stay tuned while I get the tripod set up. Right, for those of you hanging in there, welcome back. And for those of you who are not interested, well, you're not here anymore, are you? Anyway, I've got my white coat on and my goggles, and I've spiked all my hair up to look like the nutty scientist. I'm not a scientist. I need a basic understanding of this, and that's all I'm interested in. And I'm sure most of you are in a similar boat. If you're really interested in it, plenty of reading to do. Anyway, my new RO water, from changing the membrane in the unit, now gives me a starting point that's slightly higher, but not enough to worry about. It should be about 13 or 14. Alright, 15 then. Come on, make your mind up. Yeah, it's somewhere between 13 and 15, so it's still plenty low enough for me to class that as nothing in it. That'll do. So that's my start point. If you're going to play with these meters, make sure you turn them off in between. The batteries will last. Well, the batteries in that have never been replaced, and I've had that donkey's years. but if you leave them on all the time they won't last. Now this stuff is CalMag. The variety I've got was chosen for several reasons. First of all, I wanted to try some CalMag, recommended by others, but this particular brand, Shake Well Before Use, I've only used this once or twice, but I am going to start using it a little bit more regularly as we head into the growing season. This probably isn't going to do a lot for the plants this time of year, but they're going to get some anyway. Now the reason I chose this is, first of all, it's got the calcium and the magnesium in it, but it's got a reasonable amount of iron in it, and the whole thing is chelated, which means I don't have to worry so much about pH and stuff for these nutrients to be absorbed into the plant. It's also got some nitrogen in there, and that's nitrate nitrogen at 2%, and then the calcium oxide, God blimey, I need my other glasses on, is 4.5, the magnesium is 1.7, and then there's 2 types of iron in there. And the difference between the two, I haven't got a clue. I don't need to know. Okay, so there's some nitrogen in there, calcium, magnesium, and some iron. And now it's going to chuck it down the rain and make loads of noise. And all I remember from this, because I haven't used it for ages, is that it stinks. It smells like a sort of seaweedy smell. But it does say Shake Well. And the problem is, because I don't use it often, I haven't got a clue how much I need. And I might only need a tiny amount, so I certainly don't want to take the TDS level up too high. So I've got a little pipette so that I don't overdose and have to add loads of water in, because I haven't. So, well, there's a dribble. Let's see what that does. Pretty colour. Right, we'll give that a stir around and see what the TDS reads. I know what I'm aiming at, and I don't want to overcook it and put too much in. So let's see what that half a pipette has taken it from 13, 14 to 92. 90. That will do. That was a good guess, wasn't it? See, so now next time I know roughly how much to add. Now obviously it'll vary a lot depending on how much water's in there in the first place. But at the moment I've only got my non-resting mounts to do, and a couple of other things. The thing that I regularly water that I don't do, is out of sequence, is the little Phalaenopsis in the house that's in the holy clay pot. Because it's in the house it dries fast. So that gets watered every other day with my non-resting mounts, which is basically a right old mixture. I mean, there's a Cattleya in there, the Orengis, some Dendrobiums, that's Rodrigueziae or whatever it's called, my Tolumnias, there's a Brassia, there's a couple of Miltonias, there's my Oncidium Tiny Twinkle that's mounted, my Polybulbum. So there's a bit of an assortment in amongst them. So those that don't get dunked in the bucket get watered every other day this time of year. And in a couple of months' time that'll switch to every day, and I'll start upping the feed levels. But for a dose of that stuff, that's good. Now I know from past experience that if I've upped my TDS level from next to nothing to around 100 mark, the chances are the pH has not gone down very far. So I'm going to add a sploop of citric acid. I'm not getting my pH meter out because it causes me nothing but headaches and problems. It needs a good 10 to 15 minutes stood in some RO water before it even settles down to give me a sensible reading. And 9 times out of 10 I then have to calibrate it to get it to sit at 7, which is the pH I know that water is at. And then I can use it. And even when I use it, it gives me variable readings. It goes up, then it comes down, and you know, it just never sits still. So I don't trust the thing, quite honestly. But what I do know from when I had a good pH meter that was always steady and gave me good readings, I know roughly how much of my citric acid to add to that amount of water to drop the pH a rough amount to get it where I want it. And on that amount of water, this is none of your flipping imperial sploops, you know, where you've got to decide, is it a US imperial sploop or a UK imperial sploop? This is a metric sploop. Yes, I am mucking about. It does drive me up the wall. And that's going to get, in that amount of water, that's probably a little bit too much, about that. And that will take that pH down by about 0.5. So in theory it's now dropped from around the 6.8, 6.9 mark down to below 6.5 somewhere. So that's it, that's the water I'm now going to use. And I've just said what I'm going to use it on. I mean, I've got information from somebody who really goes to town about individual elements and what they do and everything, that, you know, with quite good certainty I'm told that if I start oh, the door's going now, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm basically reliably told that if I start using the CalMag on a regular basis, certainly when things are actively growing, I should notice better flowers, more blooms per spike, and more importantly for me, more new growths. So instead of like a Cattleya lead pushing out one eye, it might push out two on that same base, and it might even push some out farther back on the plant. Plus my root growth should be better. And there is some logic in that. Although my MSU fertilizer's got calcium and magnesium in it, and you know, good amount of nitrogen to get the plants going, a little bit of extra calcium and magnesium provides more building blocks. So it just allows plants to grow that bit better. Now that's other people's information, not mine. But there's only one way to find out, isn't there? And that's try it. So I've got a new growing season coming up. Let's try it. And you know, I've got enough of a memory still, even though I'm getting on a bit, to actually remember the sort of growth I got last year on my plants. Now that could be clouded. Don't forget, the plant was, let's say, size A at the beginning of last year's growing season, and by the end of the growing season it's not the same size anymore. It's a bigger, stronger plant. Well, that's the plant I'm starting this growing season with. And as we know, plants progress. The bigger they get, the more pseudobulbs, the more canes they've got, the stronger they become, the more capable they are of pushing out more new growths for the size of the plant. So there is a slight clouding issue going on there, the fact that this season is starting with larger, better plants in the main. Not in all cases. Not everything does well all the time. So anyway, I'll give that a go, and obviously this is a long thing, you know, this is a season's experiment. Well, it's not even an experiment really, it's a season of a changed routine, and quite honestly, during the season and towards the end of the season is where the results are going to be, if they're even visible. But the one thing I do know is that this can't do any harm. Yeah? So instead of, they would have got a low level feed today, instead of that this time they'll get the CalMag. Yeah? And next time they'll be flushed again, because they're not growing that fast at this time of year. The time after that I'll be back to my MSU fertilizer. And the CalMag probably won't get used for quite a while. It's not something I'm going to do like every other feed or anything like that. As I said, there is, in theory, sufficient calcium and magnesium in that MSU fertilizer. The difference is that's non-chelated, and the absorption of those two elements is at different pH ranges to get the maximum absorption rates. The calcium goes in at lower pH levels, the magnesium at higher levels. So during the same watering, either one of them's going to go in well and the other one's not going in quite so well, or vice versa. And by sticking it in the middle somewhere, you get some of each. But by doing that, is it enough? That's all I'm sort of questioning. Is that enough? But by putting those two elements in separately, combined with the iron, which is needed, and it goes with at least one of those, maybe both, to make them work, at least I know that's going in there. So that's the idea, is that every now and again the CalMag will be substituted for the MSU fertilizer to just give it a little kick, a little boost of those elements. Now magnesium will find its way around the plant, but the calcium won't. Calcium comes in through the roots and gets used as it's needed. As the plant sees fit to add some calcium into that area, it will do so until there's none left. Yeah? That's why the front end of the plant, the new growth, suffer badly if you've got a calcium deficiency, because that's where it's required. It's the building block. It's up the front end of the plant, you know. So by giving it a little extra kick now and again, as it comes in, it can go through the plant and think, oh, you've got some, you've got some, you've got some. Ah, this is where I ran out before. Now you can have some. Yeah? So that's the sort of very, very basic, simplistic theory behind using this stuff now and again. Okay, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.